I'm actually more of an introvert than I am an extrovert. So getting comfortable in not being that kind of like alpha, stand on a stage whooping and hollering and corralling the troops, like just wasn't my vibe. So figuring that out and then just actually knowing that there's strength in that. You know, you don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to have the most impactful voice in the room. So I think it's just honing what you are and then showing up in a way that is authentic.
Pip Murray, the founder of Pip Nut, the award-winning natural nut butter brand that's disrupted supermarket shelves and redefined a category.
Same way when you're running a marathon, and if you've done a number of marathons, you build up your resilience. You know that, okay, you get to mile 20, this is meant to be hard, like it's hard for a reason. I think the same goes for business, that you build resilience over time and you build the kind of muscle memory of like, oh, we've had something like this happen before. You can be more calm in the moment.
Welcome to Screw It, Just Do It, the show for those who decided to screw it and just did it. I'm Alex Chisnall, host of this podcast and co-founder of the Festival of Entrepreneurs at the NEC in Birmingham this October 8th and 9th. This is the podcast that brings you face-to-face with the entrepreneurs and business rebels who threw caution to the wind and built something extraordinary. Quick heads up, registration is now open for this year's Festival of Entrepreneurs. Join us at the NEC in Birmingham on October the 8th and 9th for 2 game-changing days with 200 plus speakers and thousands of ambitious founders. Get your free limited 2-day pass at festivalofentrepreneurs.co.uk or click my personal link in the show notes.
Welcome to the show once again.
Thank you for having me, or back.
Back indeed. And I think last time, as we were saying, we crossed paths was we did a Virgin Startup event. I think it was like 2018, 2019. And obviously you've been on a bit of a journey since then, celebrated 10 years being in business back in January. But I'd like to go back to what was your screw it, just do it moment? What was the screw it, just do it moment when you decided to leave the job and go all in on Pip Nut?
I often think the screw it, just do it moment sort of happens iteratively over time. It isn't always like this big light bulb watershed moment that suddenly like slams down and you suddenly change your life. It is was for me more of a gradual convincing myself that this was something I wanted to do, whether it was, you know, the first time I made the products that then gave me the confidence to take them to market stalls, that then gave me the confidence to throw my hat in the ring on a competition to live in a shed, that then enabled me to quit my job, which I'm sure we can dive into in a bit more detail. Or the first time we went into production, you know, that's, you know, so for me, it was a number of things. But I think the real like light bulb moment I had was around, you know, running. And I was training for Paris Marathon back in 2013. And it was weirdly actually on some of those really long training runs where you have hours and hours to think of stuff, that I started to really like, you know, cogitate on the idea of like nut butter. It was something I ate a lot when I was running, in particular because it's good for protein. But as a consumer back then, nearly every product I picked up had palm oil in. And so I kind of was thinking about it. I love food. So it was, you know, something that didn't sit well with me. A product had an ingredient that I didn't think was sustainable or that good for me. So yeah, it got under my skin and I just found I couldn't stop thinking about it. So that was where it started, I guess, but iterated over time as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? Do you still get those, you know, those moments when you're out running, when you have thoughts? And because I do, and then I'm always like, where's the pad and pen? But it's always those moments that I'm out, especially like I think out in nature, and like you say, it's those longer. It's not the 5K necessarily, because it's almost like a, you know, half a sprint, isn't it? But it's those longer runs when your mind just starts ruminating and going off in all sorts of directions.
100%. I find my best thinking time is when I'm running. I also walk to work every day. It takes me 30 minutes there, 30 minutes back. I tend to find those are also the moments I can have some really good ideas when you're just sort of like, again, it's when you're sort of churning things that are either slightly subconscious or conscious in your mind that you'll get more of the left field ideas. So yeah, sure. I'm pretty sure my team probably hate it when I come into the office and I send like 10 different random Slack messages off because they're like sparking ideas as I'm sort of moving. But movement, I think, is great for like stimulating or even just like solving the blockers on things.
Yeah, it's often not, is it? Instead of like people go, right, this is the deep thinking time, block out half a day and think about the business and strategize. But it's more like you say, going for a 30-minute walk on the way into work that will spark those conversations in your mind.
Totally.
So do tell us more about the Escape the City competition, to live rent-free in a shed for 3 months. And what did you do when you found out that you'd won the competition?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a bit of backstory here. So I had the idea for Pip Nut in January 2013, and then I spent about 2 years trying to figure out how I was going to get the product to market. About 1 year into that journey, after kind of figuring out how to make the product, how to, what I wanted to do from a brand point of view and all of that, the business was coming together. But at the time, I was still working at my day job, which was at the Science Museum as a theatre producer. I was 24 at the time, had, already at that point, a number of credit cards stacked up. I sort of self-funded the business up until that point and in terms of the development of it. And I was looking for that tipping point to say, like, right, I knew I could make the product. I needed to just get it into production. I need to raise some funding. But I was kind of stuck in that hamster wheel of like, well, I can't afford to leave my job because it's paying my salary, it's paying my rent, it's sort of helping me fund the business to a level, but equally I need to kind of give the business more time. So I saw this random competition, and it was run by a company called Escape the City, and it was called Escape the Shed, and it was a PR thing where they were giving one startup the opportunity to live rent-free in London, the catch being it's in a garden shed. They also gave desk space as well, and I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'll put my name in the ring. And I went into the competition, ended up getting voted to win it. It was sort of a Facebook competition, which feels really old school now. Like everyone would vote for their favourite startup. And Pip Nut won. And it was that funny moment where you think, oh shit, I've actually got to do this now. So I actually, that morning when the founder of that business, Escape the City, called me out and said, like, Pip, you've actually won it. You can move in a month. I literally went to my boss that day and handed in my notice. I then moved out of my flat in North London about a month later, and I moved in, and it was like a 3-month stint basically. And that 3-month stint I spent there in a really random shed in South London, which did have access to a house, so I was able to like cook and stuff, and shower. So, but I used that time to kind of crowdfund, and I did a crowdfunding campaign on Crowdcube to raise about 120 grand, which I did at the end of that sort of 3-month period, and raised the funds within 7 days. And that was the capital then I needed to kind of get the product into production.
So within 7 days, was it really? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with crowdfunding. Like it either tips or it doesn't. And it wasn't like a vast sum of money. It felt a lot to me at the time. So I think a lot of, and I'd done a fair bit of like pre-raising, often you have to like load at least a third of the funding, pre going live. So I knew it was going to get a good kick at the start, but yeah, 7 days in the end.
Wow. And what's your abiding memory of those 3 months of living in a shed?
That's a great question. It was probably the most random 3 months of my life. I felt very socially awkward, I think, partly. Equally, also felt really excited about what the future could hold, and a level of pressure, if I'm honest. Pressure to actually follow through and commit to the brand, raise the capital. I knew I only had 3 months really, and then I would need to go and get another job. I really didn't want, my parents are great, but I didn't want to have to move home and live with them. I loved London. So I felt a level of like, shit, this is me like taking a leap now. So it was a real mixture of feelings, equally freeing. Like, when else do you get a chance to spend like all your time working on a project that could potentially be like your future, business, work, life? Super exciting. It's like your 20s are there to do really weird and wonderful things. Like, that is what they're for, like exploration, do something different. Like, don't pressure yourself that you need to like be in the 9 to 5. So in lots of ways, I was like, it was great. It was really exciting. And I think my advice really, I often say to my team, like, use your 20s to figure out what you love doing, and don't feel the pressure that you have to like get up the chain of the, corporate ladder if actually that's not your thing. So yeah, for me, that's, it was a fun time, but weird at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think it's a good piece of advice as well. I totally agree with you. I did in my 24, I joined Virgin Atlantic as cabin crew. Just went from uni to the BBC where I was going to be a journalist. And after 6 months was like, do you know what? See the world and get paid to actually see the world. And I kind of let it go too long because I carried it on well into my 30s. But in hindsight, I would do it again, but I just wouldn't do it for so long, if you know what I mean, because it became a real like cosseted environment, like being a student again, where everything's kind of laid out for you, you know. But I agree with you. I think 20s is definitely the time for experimenting and doing stuff. Interesting, like when you said, and I guess it's going to be the same for a lot of people, is that the moment you quit your job and you put yourself on there, I've got this 90-day project to work on the business, you felt under pressure. Do you still feel under pressure now, or is it a different kind of pressure?
It's not the same kind of pressure that you feel when you're just starting something. When you first got an idea and you are storming and forming it and you're hoping to like launch it into the world, a lot of people will be saying to you, or maybe not directly, but you feel it. You feel that people's skepticism of whether or not your idea is any good. Or, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Like you get lots of like slightly patronizing, like, oh, that's really good of you for like giving it a go. And you're trying to convince yourself that or remind yourself in those early days that your idea is good, that you do have the ability and capability to actually do this and prove people wrong. So I think there's an element of pressure that you put on yourself there, as well, of course, like all the other natural things around financial pressure that you feel in those moments when perhaps you don't have that financial backdrop that means that this is really putting everything on the line in that moment, or it feels like that at least. Whereas now, when you're Pip Nut's established, we've gone 10 years, as you said, got a brand that works, people, I don't worry about the business or the brand not succeeding. I do worry about the team, and that is like a pressure that I feel that's constant. Like, a big part of building a brand and like the heart of the beating heart of a business is the people within it. That is the thing that I stress most about, and it's the thing that's most personal in many ways. Like forming and fostering a talented group of people that collaborate and work well together is like really difficult. It's such an intangible thing, culture, but so real at the same time. So that's stressful. Making sure you keep the momentum is also stressful, I think. You want to keep growing and at pace. You want to still deliver exciting news to consumers. You want to be seen as a hot brand, and keeping that over time is challenging, to constantly make sure that you're not becoming a dusty brand that is a bit past it. You want to keep relevant. So I think that I feel the pressure on, for sure, to and there's so many amazing businesses and brands launching. You feel the pressure to kind of like constantly level up, for sure. That's probably where my head sits at now.
And just to rewind a little bit again, why nut butter and why 2015? Obviously personal circumstances by the sound of it as well, and what you were into at the time with running.
Nut butter for me, I mean, right back in the day, it was just a product I loved. I loved it because it was delicious, fundamentally. Like, it has one of those traits, I think, peanut butter, nut butter, as being very addictive, yet you kind of feel good about it at the same time. Also, so addictive. Like, we saw a stat, actually, that 40% of our consumers eat peanut butter literally just with a spoon. So I always find it really funny because people always come up to me and they'll be like, oh, Pip, I actually just eat the product straight out the jar. And I'm like, so do a significant proportion of our consumers. Totally normal. But I love that. It's like a really positive form of nutrition. Like, you're getting like loads of nuts. It's like rich in good fats, fiber, protein. Yet equally at the same time, you're like winning. It tastes incredible. So that's what kind of got me kind of hooked and under the skin of it. I also thought there was an opportunity to clean it up. Most peanut butters at the time, when I started the business, the majority of the products on the shelf were made with palm oil, and that I thought could be fixed. Like, you just don't need it in the product. It's a natural product and it tastes great without it. So why have it there? It's not serving anyone well. And then I saw a gap for the brand as well. I'd seen in other spaces, in other categories, these challenger brands coming in that could, bring a bit of a fresh air, a breath of fresh air to a category. And I loved the fact that peanut butter was a really like overlooked, very like spreads. It's the least glamorous part of the store. And I loved the idea of bringing like life to that kind of relatively dusty category and cut through in a much more lifestyle, playful, taste-led, foodie, contemporary way, which hadn't really been done back then. So it was a real kind of combination of, I guess, of all those things as to why I landed on this product range in the first instance. And 2015, honestly, was just that's how long it took me to get. I had the idea, and it took me 2 years to get to market. But definitely timing, I think with any business is important. I think I launched the brand at the right moment in time in terms of all the trends, like protein was in, sugar and calories were becoming a bit more, well, sugar was definitely more demonized, whereas fats was actually seen as something that was good in your diet. So there was an overall health trend, which has obviously continued, that was starting to shift. So I think it was the right time for the brand, but also no one had really disrupted the space fully at that moment in time. And I think we got in there at exactly the right moment to kind of bring a bit of life to that space and store.
My kids are disgusted because I use a knife, right, and I go butter and then I go peanut butter, both still in the jars like that. So it's double on that. And you shouldn't stick a knife in your mouth anyway, I know. But I was brought up in Canada, so it was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were de rigueur for your entire life, and it's just carried on. And I've brought them on board, obviously, with me as well. But it's more like a bagel deal these days.
I'm not sure about that combo, but I know people that do it. You're on your own there, Alex.
I must be. Out of interest, do the Sunpats of this world still have palm oil in their product?
So what's actually quite interesting is, so when I launched the brand, about in the category, the brands that contain palm oil, that was about 75% plus of the total volume in the category. Now, today, over 50% of what is bought in terms of consumers buying are products of peanut butters that don't contain palm oil. So there has been a huge shift in terms of behavior around people accepting a natural product. But there are brands, obviously, that still use it. That's their kind of heritage, I guess. But actually, the norm now is a natural product, which I find hugely exciting. And it is a nice case study of how consumer behavior can shift. Because when I started the brand, I remember a few people were like, Pip, nobody's going to accept something that naturally separates, because when you don't use palm oil, it means that the oils in the nuts sometimes they come to the surface and you have to stir them back in. And people are like, it's just not going to work. Mainstream consumers won't want to pick that up. But fast forward 10 years, actually, it's now a norm. Pip Nut's now the number 2 brand in the category, although in the last 12 weeks, and this is breaking news, haven't announced yet, we became the number 1. So we have managed to massively turn the table on I guess, behavior change and how, and I guess the key point here is that it just takes time when you're trying to shift people's behaviors. Can't expect it to happen overnight, but if you are consistent with it and still deliver a really good product, you can do it.
And I read that you also, at least in the early days, I'm guessing maybe you still do, but you use that as an opportunity to educate people that if you actually see that separation, that's actually a good thing. That shows it's natural and you need to mix it up.
Yeah, exactly. You can kind of almost use it, as positive signals as opposed to a negative. So how can you, but it is an education, to your point. You do have to explain it, and that takes time.
Yeah. Oh, congratulations. And I'm surprised because I walked pretty much every day in a supermarket or in a shop, and I saw the Sunpats of this world there with yourselves, and is it Planet Earth, something like that, Planet? And I thought those old, the red and the blue, and I just thought they still haven't changed their branding, have they? Their branding's the same as it was 20 years ago almost, or 15 years ago. I'm just really surprised that they haven't reacted at all to what else is in the market.
I'm sure if you got them on, they'd say they've agitated. But actually, the category has got more competitive over the years. The brands have leveled up more. However, Pip Nut has broken through, and it's, I think, down to our very distinctive brand. We've got an amazing brand to work with in terms of, we recently did a campaign in January, and we've got a squirrel in our logo, so it's an asset that we really try and sweat as hard as possible. It's very distinctive to us, and we literally got giant squirrels on these huge ads in London blown up, and they had a slightly obsessive nature the way they were looking at our products. It's like an ad, and you see our jar, and they're sort of staring at it in a very sort of crazed way, and it has a way of, I guess, sticking in people's minds. And I think a big thing for me in brand building is, how do you make sure you're being as distinctive and disruptive as possible? Someone once told me that there's a massive cost to being boring and dull as a brand. And often as a brand, if you do more conventional advertising, i.e. something that is less disruptive, less distinctive in the mind of the consumer, you end up having to spend 2.6 times more in advertising than you would if you were actually slightly more, disruptive and sort of showed up in a way that really kind of caught attention. And it really landed with me that there's a really cost to playing it safe. So from a brand point of view, you have to look different, you have to stand out, you can't play into the conventions that exist in the category, you have to do something different. Otherwise, why would anyone see you? Why would anyone change any of their behavior? And why would they remember you in the first place?
Yeah, I remember, you'll probably tell me exactly when that was, but I remember seeing your ads on the tube like everywhere, literally for a period. I don't know if it was like 2 weeks or it was a month, but I'm kind of up in London. I was literally up like 3 or 4 days a week, every week, and I'd be doing my Waterloo to the studio in King's Cross, and I would literally see it everywhere. And it kind of, you came back on my radar. Not that you ever went away, but that definitely was like one of those moments you kind of like, boom, front and central.
I think you have to, as a brand, you have to invest in the short and the long term. So obviously advertising like that, it's more, the payback is longer, but it does build better connections, and in people's minds they'll start to build more of an emotional connection to your brand. And to your point around sort of being everywhere, you also need to make sure you peak the peaks. So when you are spending money and investing, what is still a relatively small amount in the grand landscape of like media, you need to make sure you're amplifying it as much as you possibly can in those peaks, and being as disruptive from a creative point of view, so that you actually get more cut through than what you would do if you had triple the budget. So yeah, it is a game that you've constantly got to play. When you talk about kind of advertising, you do need to commit. However, it's all in the execution and how creative you can be in delivering it.
What's the difference for you between creating products and building a brand? I read you were stocked in the early years in like a lot of the London gyms, top London gyms, not necessarily doing big numbers, but it was very much more for brand building purposes.
I mean, distribution and where you're placed is such a key part of brand building. In the early years, and still now, to be honest, because we still hold a lot of the listings that we won, in those sort of what we call iconic stores, like the Selfridges or the, the Soul Cycle, kind of cycle gyms, studios and things like that. They can do just as good a job as building your brand awareness and building associations. Like if you're stocked in Selfridges, naturally, you will be seen as a premium brand, one that is on trend, that sort of deserves the place on shelf. And it does a huge job in terms of brand halo for you, and also helps credibility when you're selling into other retailers like, I don't know, Ocado or Sainsbury's, Tesco. So it does a double whammy effect in terms of both the consumer, but also helping you then also build out your further distribution further. And so even now we make sure that we nurture the accounts that are like, we call them iconic accounts, like the Whole Foods, to make sure that we still, and I think a test of a really strong brand is one that can both be listed in Asda day to day, whilst also holding those sort of iconic accounts in sort of Whole Foods, or your really nice sort of premium delis and things like that. That is showing that you've managed to kind of stretch and be relevant across the spectrum.
If you're enjoying this conversation and thinking, I need to be around more people like this, then I've got the perfect solution for you. The Festival of Entrepreneurs is where 5,000 to 10,000 ambitious entrepreneurs come together to learn from the people who've actually done it. It's on October the 8th and 9th at the NEC in Birmingham, and I'm giving my listeners free 2-day passes. Real entrepreneurs, real stories, real strategies. Exactly like what you're hearing right now, but live and in person. Go to festivalofentrepreneurs.co.uk and get your free 2-day pass before they're gone.
To get into Selfridges, you cold emailed them to start with, right? And what was the reply that you got from Selfridges?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was initially when I was doing a market stall, and when the buyers happened to walk by the stand, and this is before the brand you see today, it looked quite different, but she was like, oh, when you're ready, like, reach out. So that's what I reached out to do. And actually, the great thing about Selfridges is they're very receptive to supporting sort of early nascent brands. I mean, you're nervous when you're pitching to them. However, it definitely is more of a nurturing environment than maybe some of the other retailers when you get into them. So they were always, I was very lucky in many ways. They were always very supportive. It wasn't like Dragon's Den vibe going in there. And that's the thing, you've got to test the waters as you're building your brand. If you're, I was a new entrepreneur, I'd never worked in FMCG, I'd never worked in business before. I was 26 when I launched the brand. I do think it's smart to sort of try and build slowly in distribution, rather than, personally, if I dived into Tesco, got 700 stores for the brand right out the blocks, not only would I just not have the experience to like enable me to keep that listing, but you're also testing it with consumers, you're learning from your supply chain, you're learning what works in terms of price point. So I do think how you build your brand slowly up in bigger and bigger retailers, you learn different things as you go. So kind of doing it in a way that's sort of sustainable and not just trying to get the hockey stick growth.
So you by putting yourself out there, you were making your own luck ultimately. Yes, somebody walked past and had that conversation with you, but if you weren't out there, if you hadn't taken that chance, rather than just sitting behind a laptop, you were out there testing your products, etc.
100%. You only get opportunities when you're out there doing something. You have to be active. An idea in your head is just an idea, but if you put it into something, in reality, it suddenly starts to live and breathe, and you get momentum. So yes, I never wanted to necessarily have a market stall brand. I love market stalls and very much respect people that do that. But I always wanted to have a kind of retail brand that sold up and down the UK in stores. But the testing and learning that I had at market stalls, and then subsequent opportunities that came off the back of it, gave me some of the stepping stones in those early days. So yeah, I'm a doer. I think, like a lot of entrepreneurs, like less about sort of theorizing and strategizing and frameworks, this and that. I love getting out there and learning and doing, because you tend to learn, like even now today, like speaking to consumers about products that recently launched. Like my favorite thing when we launch a product is that me and the whole team go and sample in like the likes of Whole Foods, and we stand at shelf for 3 hours sampling the product, which you might say is a complete waste of time because you've got loads of other things to do. But you sit and you hear what people say about your product right there and then, and you learn so much just from like that thought process or that feedback that people give you, or even just watching people's reaction over and over and over again. Either gives you a sense of like, yeah, there's something in this, or no, people don't actually like this. They're just saying that they do, but you can tell from the way that they're speaking. So market stalls, they're such a great way to test, because you're just getting feedback live.
Well, I always remember, again, back when I worked for Virgin Atlantic, I remember we used to see a lot of Richard back then in like the 90s and the noughties. And when he used to come on the plane, and I was in my 20s, I was like, why is he sitting in economy? If that was me, I'd be flat out, 10 hours to LA, sleeping. But he would sit in economy. He would have one of the crew bags, like a normal, and it was obviously thought through, right? He's very good at that. So he'd thought it through. He had the same bag that we had. It wasn't, like a fancy LMVH bag or anything like that, whatever. It was a crew bag. He'd sit in economy. And then after takeoff, he literally just used to walk around the plane with an old, pad, a pen, and literally just ask customers on the flights questions. And it's only after I left that I kind of processed that and go, wow, that was a pretty cool thing to do. One, it's great PR because you've got 300 people on the plane all going, oh my God, look, it's Richard Branson on the flight. Why isn't he in upper class watching movies? But instead he's down here chatting to us in economy type thing.
He's hustling. I love that.
Yeah, and it's valuable feedback. He's at the coalface, isn't he, in airline terms? And yes, he would go up at some point, and he would actually go into where the pilots like have their bunk beds at the flight, and he'd get his head down for a couple of hours. But he would literally spend the time. Every flight I saw him, he did that. I used to see him a lot back in those days as well, before he, moved out to his own island and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think that just underlines your point as well. No matter what market you're in, it's getting that customer feedback is absolutely invaluable. And that was in the early days of the airline as well, right? Like in the early days of your business, there's never a better time to get that feedback. You do. Tell me about the decision, talking about branding a little bit. So tell me a decision to create your own cookbook. How did that come about? How effective was it? Is it something more brands should be doing in your category?
Gosh, that was a long time ago. We launched a cookbook in 2017. It was the first nut butter cookbook. It was really cool. And I created every single recipe, 70 recipes all with nut butter, believe it or not. It is possible. There could have been more if I'd allowed the space on the pages. For me, I mean, nut butter is something that you can put in so many different things. It was always a great opportunity to kind of share a bit of the versatility of the product and give that kind of slight education to our consumers. But what was brilliant about it at the time, and certainly this was epitomized our marketing tactics in the early days, is that we actually got, I got paid to write the cookbook. Firstly, the publishers, Hardy Grant, they also paid for all of the photography and obviously food styling associated with the cookbook, and obviously they had their own PR agency when it launched, so they helped us like push it out there. So we got more press in that sort of 3-month window than we did for like the first whole year of the brand, through having all of this great content to push out into like the likes of the Guardian and the Times, like lifestyle magazines and things like that. And yeah, we had pop-ups in Selfridges where we did like toast bars and recipes from the cookbook. It was epic, and it cost us nothing, effectively. In fact, they actually paid us to do it, and we sold copies, and it was listed in, like Oliver Bonus right the way through to Waterstones, sold on Amazon. And it was just like the most amazing sort of example of guerrilla marketing, where, you don't have to assume that things have to cost you money. I mean, particularly this is your like real like advantage as a young, fresh startup challenger brand, is that people will treat you slightly differently, and these sort of opportunities come your way. But when they do, you have to grab them with both hands. But it was a fantastic opportunity to get the brand out there in a way that no one else could in our category. Nobody else had the credibility or the capability to do it, and that also was a huge advantage to us. So could we do another cookbook again? I think we could, but it was particularly that early stage that I think was powerful, when you're really sort of fresh as a brand.
Yeah, the bang you got for your buck was...
It was insane. It was absolutely amazing. So even now, I mean, we're obviously at a slightly different life stage as a brand, but my biggest thing with my marketing team is how can you make 1 + 1 = 3? You can do whatever you would like as a team, but or like from a marketing point of view, it's the idea behind how you do something that is the real magic, and how can you really sweat the idea as much as possible to amplify it as much as you can. Creativity, you can't put a price on it. It really is the lifeblood of your business.
And going back, you're clearly not a startup anymore. Do you think you still have the mindset of one, though?
Definitely. I don't think a challenger brand... Well, I think it's more challenger brand that I like to hold on to and harness. I think we have lost the startup in some ways. Like startup, you are firefighting, you are scrappy, you are hustling, although we still hustle a lot, but the energy of it is quite different to a scale up. There is, and it sounds a bit boring, perhaps it is, but there is slightly more process you have to put in place. When you have a team of 10 versus a team of nearly 40, you can't operate in the same way. It would just be carnage and actually highly unproductive. So you do have to shift your behaviours and slightly therefore style, but the approach and mindset stays the same. And I think a challenger brand, it doesn't really matter what size you are, you can still embrace that mindset. And that mindset is like, rather than thinking like we can't do that, it's sort of what if we could, or can if, it's much more open in the way that you might think about opportunities, much more associated with a kind of growth mindset and finding solutions in problems. Which we still have. So we still sweat every single penny that we have, because recently we started to push into different categories. We're now in snacking, and we're sort of in the likes of we're now a small fish in a big pond again in that world, and we're chasing the likes of Unilever, Mars, General Mills. We can't expect the £1 that we're spending to be the same value as the £1 that Mars is, because they've got far more than theirs. So we need to make sure that £1 is multiplied by creative ideas, and that's the only way we'll win. Having a better product and better kind of execution of the product and the brand overall. And
you've obviously changed, as you say, like from a startup to a scale up. How's the vision changed? What was it? What is it now? How much has that shifted?
It has evolved over the years. I think I was a founder 10 years ago that had a real passion for the products that I was making. Still have that now, by the way. I still had nut butter on my breakfast this morning. But it has evolved into something bigger. Our mission is to put the nut back into nutrition. You know, we want to make sure we are creating products that are both delicious, tasty, natural, sustainable, and we do that, you know, because nuts through the medium of nuts, because you know they're a great ingredient. They are high in fiber, protein, all the things I said earlier. They are a real powerhouse, and actually, a lot of the time, you know, we talk, you know, from a nutrition point of view about having, you know, one of your 5 a day and making sure you get that in your diet. But I think as equally as important as having a handful of nuts, you know, we all now know that fiber is one of the things that is most people don't get their recommended daily allowance of fiber in their diet, but we all know it's good for our gut. We know that it's overall good for your health to make sure you're incorporating it in your diet. So that's the role that we play. And on an even bigger picture, you know, I'm a real believer in like business has to focus on the triple bottom line. No longer can we just expect our business to succeed or society to succeed if business only focuses on profit. So Pip Nut and how we do business is really thinking about how can we live and breathe that and make sure we can show there is a different way of doing business that is really supports all stakeholders in our business.
Talking beforehand, there was a launch for Finisterre last night, who I know are, or in my mind, one of the first B Corp that I knew. At what point did you decide to go down that route yourself? How long ago has that been now, Pip?
So we certified in 2019. So at that time, there were about 150 B Corps in the UK. Now there are over 3,000, which just shows like the journey and movement that community has gone on. So we were relatively early doors in joining. The reason being, it was always something that I think spoke to me as an individual, this idea that business actually has the ability to solve some of the biggest societal issues on this planet, not be the problem. So I fully bought into that idea, and I wanted to make sure that Pip Nut, you know, lived and breathed it as much as possible. And B Corp, I always say this to anyone considering it, it is just the most amazing template you can have in terms of just using what they call the standards, which is sort of the framework that they use to kind of measure B Corps on. Just give you so much inspiration for how you could thread business impact through your purpose into your business in a more impactful way. So even if you don't want to certify, just use the framework that they have to improve your business, because you know businesses that actually really embed purpose into their day-to-day and embrace that triple bottom line will actually perform better. So it's actually good business to do business well. It's not just a nice to have sticky plaster like, oh, you've got to do a bit of CSR, otherwise it looks a bit bad. It will actually make your business perform better. We have 80% engagement in our business. Our team are so engaged in what we're doing. The number one reason why people come to work at Pip Nut is because we're a B Corp, because they want to do something that is purpose-driven, day-to-day in their work. So just think about it. If you've got a team that are like energized, focused on doing good in the world and believing in your purpose, they're going to run through brick walls to get that job done. You know, the flip side of that, if it's just about profit and making the shareholders wealthy, well, that's not particularly motivating for anyone, is it? So yeah, it comes from a very different place in terms of, and I think you can perform better as a brand if you actually have it at the center.
I love it. What's been the toughest chapter in the journey so far for you? Kind of like 10 and a half years in now.
Yeah, the toughest chapter was the middle bit, and it was. I mean, COVID years were really difficult. I mean, we actually performed quite well in COVID because we were a grocery product, and people bought loads of grocery products during COVID. So our business actually grew quite fast. But I think it was, back to the people point, it was a real challenge holding the culture together and feeling that sense of like connection across the team and sense of pressure to lead and be a better leader for them. And I think I was going through my own challenges as a leader as well. Like, you know, I was still relatively young at the time when that all happened. And I was definitely having my own kind of crisis of confidence about what kind of leader was I? How did I show up? Was I meant to be here? Should I be running this business? Sometimes I think you can often talk about the challenges in the business, like the supply chain when it falls over, or losing a customer being the lows. But actually, I find the loneliest parts are the bits where you lose confidence in yourself, or you are going through more of an internal challenge. And those are probably like the hardest things that I found to overcome, figuring that out for sure. And that middle bit for me was that was my messy middle.
Right. And who did you have to talk to at that time then? Did you suffer in silence, or did you share that with contemporaries, your partner, your closest friends?
Yeah, you can't sit on that sort of stuff. You have to talk about it, otherwise it just eats you up. A coach, to be honest, was transformational. I had a brilliant coach called Karen, still do work with her. And she really helped me get comfortable in my own skin, and started to kind of identify kind of the kind of leader that I was. I guess sometimes you just don't have enough examples to pull on, or I'm actually, funnily enough, more of an introvert than I am an extrovert. So getting comfortable in not being that kind of like alpha, stand on a stage whooping and hollering and corralling the troops, like just wasn't my vibe. And so figuring that out, and then just actually knowing that there's strength in that. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to have the most impactful voice in the room. So I think it's just honing what you are and then showing up in a way that is authentic. I think the other thing is, there is a point of just having to lean into the uncomfortability that you are a leader, and stop questioning whether you are, but just accept that that is the role that now you're in. When I started the business, all I cared about was the product and the brand. I actually didn't really think that if this was successful, then I'd end up leading a team. And so it was almost like by surprise that it ended up happening. And therefore, I always didn't really feel like I had the right to be there. And you just have to just quiet the voice down and stop giving that voice power, and instead start to embrace the things that you are good at and focus on the things that only you can do, and know that there's strength in that. So yeah, that's how I kind of started to overcome it. But it's a constant, I think, journey. I think you're not just done. You don't just figure out leadership and you've can get off the learning train. It's still a constant like challenge, especially if you still have wobbles or confidence, crisis of confidence as well.
And then those voices get louder in moments of stress, don't they? And I was thinking, like, physically as well as mentally, like running a marathon, that voice gets louder that you can't do it, that you should stop, and it's the same, I think, with running a business, and it's learning to kind of quieten that voice down, or take some advice that quietens that voice down. I mean, it's still there. It's still always there, isn't it? But it's at different peaks and troughs in the journey.
I love that. I do love that analogy because it's very true, in terms of how it gets louder and louder. Like, why am I running this marathon? It does. It just gets louder as the miles tick up. And yeah, you've got to find, and I think though, you get resilience though, and the same way when you're running a marathon, and if you've done a number of marathons, you build up your resilience. You know that, okay, you get to mile 20, this is meant to be hard, like it's hard for a reason, etc., etc. I think the same goes for business, that you build resilience over time, and you build the kind of muscle memory of like, oh, we've had something like this happen before. You can be more calm in the moment, so you don't spike in the same way in terms of stress. Doesn't mean that you don't experience stress, you just perhaps are better at dealing with it. So annoyingly, like with a lot of things, time is a big, teaches you a lot. You sometimes do just have to have more years of experience to then suddenly start to feel a little bit more settled.
Coming to the end, last few questions. Tell me, we're moving so fast at the moment in another, industrial revolution. How are you guys using AI technology innovation in your business right now?
We're still relatively early in the AI journey. We are trialing and testing lots of applications within our business, and sort of trying to get our team sort of learning about it and just using it a bit more day to day. I think there's going to be some really exciting things that we can do from a kind of insights point of view, really starting to understand, and be faster at like learning and sort of analysing insights that we have, and that therefore then informing kind of our product and innovation pipeline in a more interesting way. We're also starting to explore, how can we apply it within creative? So, we've done one TV ad before, was very expensive in terms of creating it. And I think there can be some potential unlockers for smaller challenger brands about how they can create creative in a much more cost-effective way than probably it was in the past. The thing that I'm always though conscious of with it is that AI won't replace like brilliant ideas. Like you still have to be the one to generate those. And so the thing I'm really making sure for myself, but also my team, is that like the idea still has to come from you. You still have to, stress that, and still sometimes the best ideas come from a conversation across the room with your peers. So like, don't think that you're going to get it from just typing in a load of prompts into GPT. Like, so yeah, I think it's how can you use it to kind of like speed you up, but to enable you more space to think creatively. And I think that's going to be the superpower for it, for us at least in our business, and many other ways, I'm sure.
Okay, before we go to quick fire round, Pip, looking back, is there anything you do differently, or are you very much everything happened for a reason?
The only thing I probably would do a bit differently, and I don't know if this is impossible because hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? But I think I would have tried to enjoy it a little bit more and document the journey a little bit more. I think I spent quite a few of the first few years just quite stressed, if I'm honest, and maybe that's just a part of the course. You can't really avoid that, but I think I could have had a little bit more fun. So I think that might have, and I don't know if that comes down to being a sole founder. You are by yourself, so you haven't got someone to spar with. I've got some amazing friends in the industry now, and I wonder if I should have spent a bit more time fostering those in the early days, so that if I didn't have that co-founder to lean on, then how can I have the people that I can go for lunch with and be like brutally honest about what's going on in my life and my business? So that I think I would have changed.
Interesting. It's funny that when I was chatting to mutual friends of ours again, but Jamie and Ed from Candy Kittens, and they're like, yeah, we wish we'd documented the journey more. And I was just like, well, if he hasn't documented the journey more, Jesus.
There's no hope for any of us. Yeah.
That's the phrase I was looking for. There's literally no hope for any of us. It's like, crikey, it's like 24/7.
I mean, they've got a lot of content now, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Quick fire round to finish up. So whatever comes into your head, short, snappy answer. Pip, for you, what is an entrepreneur?
Anyone can be an entrepreneur is what I believe. But an entrepreneur is someone who has a passion for an idea and grit to get it done.
And what is a scale up?
A scale up is a brand or business that has gone beyond those early stages where you have not necessarily got complete product market fit, but you have, so a scale up has kind of transitioned into kind of, you've certainly got product market fit, and then you're on that next stage of catapulting. And there are thresholds. I think when you start to tip above 20 million, at least in FMB, food and bev, that's when I think you start to shift away from being that startup into more of a scale up.
Okay. What does this country need to do to get more startups?
Invest more in women, I think. I'm still shocked about the lack of funding that goes to women, but also interesting, like only 20% of businesses that are created by women. There's still a massive gap. So thinking just about all that talent that could have had an idea, got it to market. And so I think there's many reasons for that, too many to kind of unpick now, but giving more confidence to women, having more role models for women to learn from, to encourage them to do more, better access to finance. There's definitely bias issues in the investor world as well. So tackling some of that, I think, would unlock more businesses generally, and then more businesses that get to scale up.
Great answer. Why is the USA better at producing scale-ups and unicorns than the UK?
Good question. I think the size of the market has a big part to play. Like niches can become really big businesses. I also think culturally they have an environment where they accept failure more sort of freely, and therefore it's seen as a strength, and therefore people are more likely to give it another go and go again until they suddenly hit on something that then just explodes.
Which founder do you admire most personally?
Ed Perry from Cook Foods. I don't know if you know them. They're an amazing frozen meal brand, really big. That you can see them up and down the high street, but also in loads of stores. But they were one of the first B Corps actually in the UK. their business employs ex-convicts in their big kitchens, their factories, and they just embody what I think purpose and purpose-driven business is. So he's a bit of a role model for me.
I don't know that at all. So that's interesting, because my next question always is to finish up, and you don't have to answer this now, but having been on the show a couple of times, could you recommend anyone for the show that you think might not be on my radar?
Well, then him. He is an amazing speaker, and their business is beautiful in every way. So get him on.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pip. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and I wish you continued success with yourself and the business.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That conversation just proves something. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So here's my challenge. Upgrade your network. The Festival of Entrepreneurs is happening October the 8th and 9th, and I'm giving my listeners free 2-day passes to get in the room with 5,000 to 10,000 entrepreneurs who are actually building something. This is where the risk takers, the game changers, and the people who've decided to screw it and just do it come for inspiration, education, and connection. Don't just listen to their success stories, go meet the people living them. Grab your free pass now, because the biggest risk isn't taking a chance, it's missing the opportunity entirely. If this conversation resonated with you, don't just sit there, act on it. Make sure you follow or subscribe for more game-changing conversations, and remember, the only thing standing between you and your business breakthrough is the decision to screw it and just do it.